Stoa is a digital campfire where we cohere in dialogue about what matters most at the knife's edge of what's happening now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Stoa. The Stoa is a digital campfire where we gather to cohere in dialogue at the knife's edge of what matters most. And what matters more than the conflict between the sexes? So today we have the Philosopher Queens, myself and Rachel Haywire, and we're going to be talking about a new series that we are beginning with this initial chat between the two of us to frame a set of metaphysical questions, questions about the female human condition, questions about who are we becoming, what are the kinds of role models that we have out there, and what is this new path, the path of the Philosopher Queen. So the format of this event is going to be like many of the other Stoa events. We're going to do about half an hour of banter between the two of us where we contextualize this project and talk about our own experiences, kind of coming into our senses of the female condition. And then we're going to turn to questions from the audience. And we're going to do something special where for the first initial wave of questions, we're going to ask the women in the room to come forth with their questions for us. So we're very excited to start this project. I think it's going to be really interesting. And with that, Rachel, tell me, what inspired you to create this idea of the Philosopher Queen series here at the Stoa?
Hi, Raven, and hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. I was inspired to write the Philosopher Queen Manifesto initially because I noticed there was a new current, or perhaps an old current, that was resurfacing of a divine feminine nature that was very powerful, a bit dark, according to some, yet in need of exploration. And I wanted to bring forth this archetype or resurface this archetype so we could discuss what was happening. And I dubbed us the Philosopher Queens. We're not trad wives, but we're also not social justice activists. We're femme fatales. We occupy an interesting space, and I believe it's time for us to explore this space.
Great. I'm going to just read a little bit of the Philosopher Queen Manifesto just to contextualize what we're talking about here. I threw the link in the chat, so if you'd like to look at the Medium post that kind of outlines Rachel's thinking, it's right there. So I love that you begin with Camille Paglia. So I'll be right up front about my influences here. I'm currently reading Sexual Personae, which is the magnum opus of the heretical feminist Camille Paglia. And I would have to admit that a lot of my views as a feminist come from her. And she is a very controversial figure within the world of feminism. And I think that that's kind of partially what Rachel and I are drawing from, which is her lineage. Her lineage, which is very primarily interested in the Great Mother and these like dark qualities of the feminine that are often kind of pasted over with these ideas that have kind of persisted of purity or kind of the virginal aspect of the feminine. So the beginning of the Philosopher Queen Manifesto begins with the greatest philosopher queen herself. Camille Paglia once said that there is no female Mozart because there is no female Jack the Ripper. I posit that by the same token, there is no male Sylvia Plath because there is no male Courtney Love. Gender comes in cycles, and that which we do not reveal becomes that which the world desires. Along this line of reasoning, there is no female equivalent to the Hells Angels. And if we join a gang like the Hells Angels as an obscure gesture of folklore, this is quite different from an intellectual pursuit. We are out in the wild, attempting to domesticate ourselves into the feminized society we feel too masculine for. Yet are we really that masculine? Or are we simply not the plastic healing goddesses we are supposed to be on Instagram? Categories such as hashtag boss girl and social justice activist do not define us and never could contain us. We were not second wave feminists, and we were not third wave feminists. We were something in the middle, yet unable to connect with these waves that crash the oceans of our desires. This is fine, and this is natural, and this is what is going on here. It is time for us to come forward and define ourselves once again, as our previously obscured current is beginning to take shape. Let us reveal only half of that which we know, and admit that even half of that is too much. We are the Philosopher Queens. Or, pardon me, we are Philosopher Queens. We are the rising of the divine feminine in its chthonic form. We are Philosopher Queens. We blast open the doors of perception and explore the deepest areas of our minds and spirits. We revive the power of chaos in her original essence as our new order begins to take shape. We are Philosopher Queens. We are the origin of every story. I think you really encapsulate the Dionysian here, Rachel. So there's some like metaphysical terms that we've already kind of begun to use, which I think would be worth discussing. We talked about you have the chthonic in your manifesto. Can you tell me a little bit about what the chthonic means to you?
Yes, it's the deep, it's the obscured, it's the hidden, the forbidden, the taboo, the transgressive. It's that which is kind of glossed over by, I guess you could call them the healing goddesses, the chakra police, if it's new names for them. But a lot of the origin is in the root of Cthulhu. You know, like Camille talks about the Forbidden Zone. I don't know if you guys saw the film, The Forbidden Zone, but it touched on similar themes. And there was a dark goddess philosopher queen who was one of the main characters in the film, The Forbidden Zone. And it talks about this mystical force of the unknown, this chaotic power.
Yeah, so the chthonic, you know, is like the bowels of the earth, right? And so in the metaphysics that Camille charts out in her book Sexual Personae, you have the Apollonian, which is associated with reason and light and order and purity, kind of exemplified in the art of Greek culture. For example, the kind of beautiful boy posed in a kind of contemplative way with these sharp delineated edges, right? These are the kinds of textures of the Apollonian. It's also associated with masculinity. And the Dionysian is that which the Apollonian is actually attempting to run away from. So the Dionysian has the qualities of murkiness. There's like, it's muddy. It's got all of this like disgusting kind of qualities to it. But it's also the place where we celebrate and we go into kind of hysterical frenzy. We go into religious experiences and have these kind of mind-altering moments of singularity. And the chthonic is an element of the Dionysian and is that which is the most kind of renegated to the bowels of the earth, that which is hidden. And so there's an element of this that for me, just on a personal level, it's kind of like, why would these abstractions be helpful? Like, why is it helpful to think of the Apollonian as masculine or the Dionysian as feminine? And I've had lots of conversations with friends of mine who kind of push back on this idea that there is any necessity in like making these male or female qualities. But for me, it's actually been extremely helpful to kind of come to terms with the dark feminine in my own experience and to admit to that which is dark and powerful. There's also a sense of which the female as a victim, as some sort of kind of pure force that is passive and things come to her. And in that metaphysics, you know, she's not necessarily responsible for that which she does. And the element of the dark mother, the great mother, is that of the devouring mother, the mother who eats her own children, you know, who has a kind of power that's charged by the bowels of the earth. And this is seen in, at least in Pollia, as nature. You know, the Apollonian is the force that turns away from nature. And so we have this kind of tension or this conflict between the circular, the recurrence, that which repeats itself from one generation to the next, that which is the mother to the daughter, who becomes the mother, who then gives birth to the daughter, and as that continues on and on. And then you have the Apollinian, which attempts to differentiate itself, and that is difference. So you can also see it within a Deleuzian sense, which is difference and repetition, which is one of his most influential books. The Dionysian is the repetition, and the difference is the Apollinian. And this is all metaphysics, and you're here for Philosopher Queens. So pardon if the philosophy is kind of a lot to take in, but both Rachel and I are, you know, drenched in metaphysics and in philosophy, and that's part of my interest here, and for both of us too. We want to bring in women who are specifically philosophers, who are working through these ideas, who are confronting some of these dark elements that I think both of us maybe share different kinds of critiques of feminism, but certainly this idea of like the pure goddess, who's like kind of this perfect form, who has no evil to her, I think is a reduction of femininity. And Rachel, I think that you share that view as well.
Yeah, I really do, because people think about the Disney princess, and then they think about the Disney villain. You have Ariel on one spectrum, and then you have Ursula on the other end of the spectrum. But in the manifesto, I say, well, what if Ursula was hot? Yeah, you know, what if there was a synthesis? You know, but what if this celebration of life, this chaos, this nature, it was about the root, the origin, the mother, the giving birth to a new current? And what if this was metaphysically a phoenix rising through the ashes? What if it wasn't something to shun? You know, what if this was a very powerful force that we were only just now beginning to truly reckon with? And, you know, through the ages, we've had everybody from Joan of Arc to Amelia Earhart to philosophers like Kathy Acker, contemporary commenters like Nina Power, even visual artists like Joan Pope, who embody the death and the rebirth and the cycle of nature. And my question is, what are we going to do with this energy? What can we, as Philosopher Queens, happening with this current, and what are we exploring? And I was having a conversation with Raven earlier where she was telling me about this trip that she had. And I would love for you, Raven, to get into this, because it just sounded really groundbreaking from what you were telling me.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Rachel. So yeah, this weekend I went on a camping trip and took 2 doses of acid and ended up having a very archetypal experience. And it, I don't know, I think that there's a variety of kind of experiences that people have on acid, but I have a tendency to kind of, you know, time begins to phase in from multiple aspects of my life. And so I was kind of walking through a time that was both my time as a child, as a little girl, and also my like experience of my mother, who, for me, there's a kind of special relationship that I have with my mother because she passed away when I was 19. And so there's always this this attempt to reconnect or to empathize with her as a figure, because I have this absence of this mother figure in my life. And so I had this moment where I was climbing up these boulders up to the top of a mountain, and the sun was pouring down upon me. And there was a moment of which I was looking at my body, and I look like my mother. I have her body, and I have her face, and I have her being, and I was looking at my hands. And I had this singularity where I felt that I was my mother, and I was also myself, and I was also a sister, and I was also a daughter, and I was also a lover, and it was all happening in a single moment. And I like broke down behind the boulders and started kind of sobbing in this hysteria of this moment. And for the rest of the trip, I was occupying this this space of multiple modalities. And to me, this was like peak Dionysian, right? It was like, it was an embodiment of this like property of like female existence, which Alexander Bard talks about, which is the mother and the daughter are not different. You know, they don't need to be different. If anything, there's actually a danger in their difference, that they may not pass down that which has been learned from the female line. And so there's a kind of sameness that exists within femininity. And then that to be kind of embodied in my experience and how I was relating to all the people around me, you know, as this mother figure, I was reading out loud, and, you know, I had a friend put her head on my chest, and I was thinking about how as a child I put my head on my mother's chest and heard the vibrations of her body as she read to me. And I thought about myself teaching my own child how to read. And then I thought about all the women who've taught their children how to read. You know, so there's this kind of, there was this ricocheting of empathy that was rooted in all of these different aspects of the feminine experience that was happening kind of in this singular moment that I was going along with all of these trips. And some of the, I mean, I'm still kind of processing in the wake of this experience. And of course, there were also other kinds of little tiny dramas that happened that we could blow up and maybe do an analysis of. But I think, you know, I think that this is sufficient to kind of talk about this point, which is that inside of the feminine experience is these multiple dimensions, and it's, you know, the triad of the feminine, the maiden and the mother and the crone, you know, is a pretty kind of ubiquitous understanding of femaleness. And I think that this really, at least in this moment, really resonated with me in the sense that I could feel myself being all of these things simultaneously. And so there's a kind of strangeness, because there's also, and I think Rachel, you can totally identify with this as well, there's aspects of myself that are, I consider to be very masculine. So there's like an attempt to synthesize, to exist with, and really embody this, you know, the singularity of the female experience, and to put it front and center. You know, for me, I like heavily identify with motherhood. It is the most important thing that I think I can do in my life, is to like have a child. And that's not something that everybody believes of my generation, and I'm not prescribing it for anybody else, but for me, that is like a central value, and it pushes me forward into adulthood. It makes me look at the things about myself that I need in order to grow, in order to take on the responsibility for someone else and for someone else's life. And it also has me empathize with my own mother, who I basically can only access through these thought experiments because of her absence in my existence. But at the same time, there's all of this possibility of being a woman now that hadn't been available to women before, that you can walk in the world of men and also be a mother. You know, whereas in the history, it would have been, if you were to walk in the world of men, you were a prostitute. There weren't really these types of fluid roles. And so there's a sense of which I'm grappling with this, the synthesis of these qualities, the desire to take on, you know, deeply this like role of the feminine that is like an inherited fact of like being of this female lineage, but also to engage in the opportunity of the masculinization of society and the democratization of opportunity that we now have as women.
Yeah, I would echo that sentiment, and I've developed a deep respect for motherhood as someone who came from a background where people were kind of like against, you know, the traditional family, you know, hanging out in a lot of more like goth subcultures, which embodied the dark goddess, which embodied the mother figure, but at the same time, they were very against having kids. So kind of like having come full circle and having talked to a lot more mothers and women who want to be mothers, beginning to see how it all connects and how it is all a part of the same lineage. Even if you think about the different archetypes like Kali Ma, the goddess of chaos, the goddess of destruction. But the question is like, what happened after the destruction or rebirth? Aphrodite, we have all of these different archetypes of women. And the question is, do we embody all of them? How do we understand our lineage as women from different parts of the world, with different backgrounds, with different ideas? And operating in the world of the masculine is definitely something that I'm familiar with, having been involved in a lot of male industries, everything from technology to politics. And I did notice that there was a lack of a female presence in a lot of these worlds, because women didn't want to be perceived as masculine, which I think is kind of reductionist, because it is possible to embody masculine traits and be a divine philosopher queen. You know, to turn it back to the philosopher queen theme, that is okay. We can embody the masculinity and operate in this world of men while still being a part of this lineage of powerful divinity. And I don't think that there's necessarily a contradiction in that. And I know there are a lot of women who feel, you know, well, I'm not trad enough, you know, I'm not feminine enough, I'm not masculine enough. What is, like you are you are a woman, you have that internal power, you are a part of this lineage, and you should simply be.
Yeah, I mean, I think I completely understand what you're saying. Like, there's no need to see oneself as in lack, right? Like, to see oneself as needing to kind of either be more feminine or more masculine, to kind of fabricate oneself based on a sense of what one ought to be, right? Like, I think that there is absolutely a kind of fallacy in that, but there is some kind of strangeness. And of course, people debate this. And Polya has a famous quote, one of her most controversial, that is, you know, if civilization had been left up to women, we'd all be living in grass huts. And I mean, I love it. I love that. Like, I guess for me, it's the idea that philosophy is a male pursuit, or the building of civilization has been a male pursuit, that it has been actually an act of terraforming that comes of the male impulse to turn away from the feminine, to turn away from nature. I don't find anything wrong with that. And I think that's a very Pollyan thing. I mean, she is like interested in the riches of culture, which are often attributed to men. And so there's a way in which this like Amazonian feminism that she proselytizes is not afraid of the existence of masculinity or the riches of masculinity, that which has brought great culture and great literature and great philosophy and political theory into the world. And I follow in the line of that. But what follows also from that is a kind of understanding that the femaleness that I am is not that which is exclusively created by femininity, but has been also what men have created, the stories men have told about women, and how sexual personae have actually been produced through the likes of Shakespeare, right? Like, Shakespeare wrote these characters of femininity that really, you know, someone like Rosalind from As You Like It, or Cleopatra from Antony and Cleopatra, these characters that were so rich and full of emotion, that actually occupied roles that women in society of that day would have not had the opportunity to do. And that sits in the consciousness. It makes an imprintation on reality, and it carves out the possibility of an alternative way for women. And I think that you can chart this throughout the Western lineage, where like the notions of being female have actually been notions that men have written in many cases. And it wasn't until you know, a couple hundred years ago that women were given the opportunity to write about their own experiences. And in that sense, they were also doing something that was considered to be a male pursuit. So there's so much complexity in the situation in terms of the dynamics between male and female. And the preservation of the polarity, I think, allows for the tension to kind of persist. And of course, there's also these people in between. And actually, that is who the artists have been. You know, the male artists who produce great works of literature often were kind of androgen. And same with, I think, Rachel and I. We actually occupy the space of the androgen. And in that space, you move between roles. You actually explore the possibility of being that which is not polarized. But you still don't, I mean, I think that the difference between maybe the metaphysics of Polya or some of these other folks is that there's a desire, I think, in contemporary thought, especially the pop cultural kind, to devour the polarity. We want to cannibalize it. We want it to basically be made completely horizontal, so that the mixing, all that exists is the Dionysian at this point, you know, just like the bottom of things, kind of the flatness of things, a Deleuzian plateau, let's say. But I think, you know, in acceptance with the idea of the Apollinian is like, no, the polarities are actually, not only are they, you know, functional, they're just real. You know, there's a sense in which these polarities exist as categories, transcendental categories that have real kind of attributes in reality. And when we don't look at them, they come for us. I mean, that's actually part of the thing, is like, if you don't look and you don't consider the Great Mother and her devouring nature, she'll come for you. She'll come for you and she'll eat you. Right. So it's like, and I think that you can see that in your manifesto, right? You talk about the half that is revealed, the half that is concealed. The half that is concealed, if you don't account for that, if you don't see that, like, this is a person who reveals herself only half in a halfway, you don't account for that which you cannot see, it will come for you, because you've reduced the person to only this kind of pure element, maybe the trad element or whatever, and you don't actually see this chthonic element that is actually kind of where the power lies.
That's exactly where the power lies. I think of a show, True Blood, where there was this character, Marianne. She was a Maenad. I think that's the proper pronunciation, where she devoured everything that was in her path. And it turned out that she was acting on this very natural, primal impulse, talking about this primal instinct of nature that a lot of the characters in True Blood weren't able to grapple with. And, you know, of course, they villainized her. But if you really think about it, these are the women who have changed history. These are the women in between, the male, the female, the androgynous, as Alexander Barber called it, the androgyny or something, I can't pronounce it, but he has a word for this, where it's people who operate in between the male and the female worlds. And I think that's very crucial, because we're so polarized with gender right now. And I think there's like this desire for, I guess you could call it like frivolity or insincerity, that a lot of women are adopting, you know, where everything has to be like some unserious, you know, meme or joke. And then there's the other side, which is like the hashtag self-care activists. And it's important that we look at other opportunities, other forms, and other archetypes, and understand the history of this current, where it came from, where it is now, and where it is going. I think back to the Xena, the Princess Warrior, and how incredible Xena the Princess Warrior was. And then Wonder Woman came out like 15 years later, and I'm like, well, this is kind of boring, right? Why do we need Wonder Woman when we have Xena? You know, I mean, that seemed to me like a regression. I'm not meant to get off into a pop culture tangent, but where are the bad Amazon chicks, right? So there's a lot to be explored in this realm, and I encourage everybody here to explore it and to understand it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think we can kind of see, I mean, even here at the Stoa, right, there's a strong observation. I mean, it's just an observation. I wouldn't go so far to say it's a critique, but there's an observation that there's a pretty heavy skew towards men rather than women. And so I'm racking my brains, like, why is this the case, right? And I think like the initial, like for me, I am not really interested in accusations of misogyny or sexism. That is not the first thing that I'm going to look at. I think that that is like a knee-jerk reaction, and it doesn't. If there is a case of misogyny or sexism, which I have personally not experienced here at all, to make that be your kind of declaration of the problem, I think is also to obscure maybe some of the underlying dynamics that kind of create these skews to begin with. And of course, this series is an attempt to try and attract this conversation, attract other women. And I think part of it is like, we're so distributed in all these other groups, and there are just fewer women who are interested in philosophy, let's say. And so we have to kind of get them to congregate. And I'm hoping that this can be kind of part of that, right? Because we want to be together. I feel such a longing for female relationship. And I mean, that's part of why, Rachel, it's just been such a gift to get to know you over the course of this year and to work with you and to have someone in my life that I can share this type of very, abstract kind of niche, interest in like, Deleuze and Alexander Bard and like all of these like weird things that pretty much, nobody else really knows about. To have someone like you is, it's like a sister in the darkness. To move through this territory that otherwise feels pretty isolating. And I hope that we can, draw more women who are interested in these things. And yeah.
That's so touching to me. Thank you so much. My heart right now, yeah, I feel the same way. And I feel like there are a lot of other women out there like us who would love to be a part of the Philosopher Queens series of the Stoa. And all of you here, if you know of any women that you think would be interested, we want to bring them on board. We want to talk to them. We want to speak about their interests. We want to host panels with them. And we want to bring more women on this wavelength into this community because we think that it's a beautiful thing. And I think with that, maybe we should start taking questions or.
Yeah, so women in the room, do you have any questions? If you want to, you can just raise your hand and please feel free to ask us any question and challenge us on our underlying axioms as well. I mean, I think that this is, it was really important to, like challenge one another and try and, okay. Yeah, and if anyone else has questions, you can go ahead and put them in the chat and let us know what you're all thinking before I start calling on people. Hi, Lisa.
Hi. Thank you.
What are you thinking?
I went in several different directions at the same time. I just want to first thank you both for when I saw this, I instantly thought, well, this is so cool because it's, first of all, I know it's not an accusation of misogyny, and yet we're having the conversation. So I love the both and of your starting position. So many things popped to mind. The first thing I did was I grabbed my I Ching. Because what your conversation about Alexander Bard and temporality and temporalities especially intrigued me. I'd love to hear you go back and forth a little bit about that. But what came up for me was the 48th hexagram, the well, and the inexhaustible, and I think that really relates to like Donna Haraway's work and the chthonic and various other themes that you've touched on. So that chaotic, that depth, that inexhaustibility, that trans-temporality. That's what is sparking in me right now. I don't know if that was a question, but I'd love to just hear your thoughts.
Sure. Rachel, do you have any thoughts about Donna Haraway or the well?
Oh yeah. Oh my God. So Donna Haraway was one of my big inspirations when I became a transhumanist. I read the Cyborg Manifesto, and she was one of the first women to really go against identity politics. And she didn't talk about misogyny. She didn't talk about victimhood. She talked about how women were kind of stuck in these human forms when we could be so much more than that. And I see Donna Haraway as a big inspiration for so much of this philosophy and so much of this dialogue. And thank you for mentioning her.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's interesting, Donna Haraway. So, and I think that this is maybe a kind of conversation we have. I know that you're no longer like really affiliated with transhumanism, but there's a thing about transhumanism that you know, the xenofeminists say nature is unjust, change nature, right? And so that kind of leads us to a conclusion of the alterations of our bodies to kind of transcend the qualities of the feminine condition. The way that I would differentiate this is that there's a female experience, but there's also the female condition, and that is rooted in the biology of the body. I think the female experience is something that can be decoupled from the female body, and to me that it kind of explains transness as a meaningful element of femininity, but also the condition of the female body as a womb, you know, as this entity that human life incubates inside of, I think is something that Donna and the xenofeminists rightfully identify as tyrannical. It's a tyrannical force. It is a condition. It is something that you have to endure. And in that sense, I think that you can go two different ways with this. You know, you can liberate yourself from that, and that's like the kind of transhumanist route. That's a xenofeminist route. That is like, let us transform our bodies so that we may transcend this condition. Or, I mean, for me, I've taken the route of embracing this quality of my existence. And that's where the kind of mother archetype comes in. I take this incubator as my own. And, you know, that is like part of how I'm developing my understanding of the female condition as I move forward in my life. And I think that it's an interesting thing, the condition of birth and of incubation as a female experience, you know, is at the very least necessary kind of empathy for the condition of femininity as it has been in the past. Now, of course, we've had a decoupling of sex from reproduction. And so we're kind of living in the wake of this new era where sex is not that which it has been before. It doesn't have the same kinds of risks. It doesn't have the same kinds of like consequences to it. And so this, I don't know, this kind of decoupling and the splitting and the technological intervention that allows for women to transcend their bodies, I think is, you know, it's totally unprecedented. And it creates these new, you know, the Cyborg Manifesto. It creates the possibility of this world of synthesizing with machines that can, for some women, provide them an exit from the female condition, which some women are interested in. I personally am not.
I think I can go in a lot of directions. And I see Albert Kim saying a recovering transhumanist. Yeah, so transhumanism these days, it's just about immortality. And I think there's so many more possibilities than immortality. I would consider the xenofeminist to be post-humanist, even futurist.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, because transhumanism, it's just like a branch of public health right now. Like, let's talk about post-humanism, let's talk about xenofeminism, let's talk about the possibilities of the human body, not just about like transcending our body and like going up into the cloud, but enhancing our bodies in whatever way we want, whether that's changing our gender to enhancing our gender, to becoming more feminine. And I at the risk of being someone who has unpopular views, wouldn't want that, right? I think that it's about so much more than like being trans. It's about understanding the human condition and reaching to higher metaphysical depths. Perhaps, you know, you don't just want to change your gender. Perhaps you want to become, you know, like a queen or somebody who can fly. That there's so many possibilities when we talk about transcendence and futurism here. And I definitely don't want to conflate that with the immortality cult, because
Yeah.
it's a completely different world.
Totally. Yeah, when we look into the future versus looking into the past, there's very different kinds of possibilities there. I mean, the post-human question, and like what that does for us as human beings, I think is like a pretty important one in terms of contextualizing the human experience. And that's, you know, that goes beyond, you know, masculinity or femininity at all. I mean, that is kind of a biological quality. Yeah, so definitely, I think you're right to say that it is post-humanist. Thank you, Lisa, for that provocation. Really appreciated that. Also love the idea of the well. So I want to invite anybody else to ask questions. You know, we're here, we're two brains, and we have things to say. And it's lovely to be here.
I've got a question. It's
Yeah.
all right. Hi, nice to meet you guys, and thanks for the event. I was wondering if you could expand a little bit more on the commentary around the Great Mother, and specifically the devouring aspect of the archetype being, I think, more of like the energy of the power, I believe you guys said. Because I think with my point of view, I see the archetype as a whole, and that tonic element, the forgotten, as more of a repressive element of the feminine, something that needs to be reclaimed and sort of made, sort of brought back into the light, and a necessary sort of darkness that that feminine element brings, sort of balances out the light element, and kind of together they hold to me like the core of the power. And, you know, just to throw it back a little bit more to the comment about Ursula, I think like in her darkness, in her non-sexy hotness, like she's the Baba Yaga archetype, she's the devouring mother, and she, through those dark initiations, she forces like the maiden to transcend, to kind of go through psychic transformation. And the maiden kind of has her own power in that case, her openness, her trust, her naivety. And it's kind of through the bridging of these moments that the feminine really kind of takes shape and takes hold. So anyways, just wondering if you could expand just a little bit more upon your ideas around that.
Oh yeah, thank you for that comment. I think that was an excellent way of talking about, because I mean, you're bringing up an excellent point. The maiden has her own power. I think that this is something that is absolutely critical for women to address for themselves, just on a like day-to-day basis. For a long time, I denied personally like the power of my own kind of youth and vitality as a young, beautiful woman. And it is a kind of denial that I see that's like weird. It's like a weird kind of self-deception, right? It's like, oh my God, you can see just like the worship of these beautiful maiden figures. It's just everywhere. It's like on the internet. It's like everything. I mean, everything is this maiden worship. And yet, you know, individually, women, I think, don't necessarily kind of fully understand the implications of their power. And of course, the internet like exaggerates this specific kind of power because it's so image oriented, which is also the realm, you know, that the maiden walks in with such great asymmetrical power, especially over men. So I think that you're totally right to call out the power of the maiden. I think the funny thing about it, or I guess it's kind of the unification of the maiden and the kind of Baba Yaga, or, you know, the Great Mother archetype in some sort of tension, because of course that's the other element of this, is that you know, women aren't some sort of like monolith of perfectly aligned figures. There's a lot of conflict that happens between women. And there's often conflict between, and you can see this in like maybe the story of Snow White, right? So you have the stepmother who is cruel and evil and ugly and, you know, obsessed with her own appearance. And you have this beautiful kind of this virgin character who she is jealous of. So there's also kind of the tension between these figures that creates these like dark, you know, these kind of darker dynamics. I think for me, where the Great Mother is such a kind of yearning is the fact that it has been repressed. And then that repression, it has a kind of allure to it. It draws me in on a personal level. And it also, and I mean, I think honestly what you said is just so perfect, because I would consider myself to be in a maiden phase, right? I'm like a young woman. I'm not yet mother. I am not yet crone. But it is the confrontation with the virtual of the Great Mother, the idea of the Great Mother, that is forcing me to kind of reconcile with my own self-deception, with the things that I don't wish to see about myself that are dark, you know. And the other thing that I think about this is that the acceptance of the Great Mother and her kind of virtuality as a presence that can come along with you, in my eyes, is a gift, because the devouring mother is a real archetype. I don't know, you know, how everybody's relationships with their mothers are, but there is a total presence of a mother who smothers her children, who holds them close and does not let them go, even when they need to go, even when they need to be left, even when they need to be cast away from the breast. It's like, get out of here, go and differentiate yourself. And it's like totally a pitfall of the mother to hold her children close and not let them become their own. And I see that as being kind of starting to dance in this direction of the devouring mother, of embodying the devouring mother. And so the process of coming in contact with the Great Mother archetype, I'm seeing in myself that which could become the devouring mother. And to me, that is like, it's a gift to get a chance to work through those things before I have children. So that's kind of, yeah, my understanding of the matter. And I really appreciate your comment. I think that was beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And if you want to respond, go ahead.
Sure, thank you. That was a really lovely response. I think you're hitting the nail on the head there as well with where I'm coming from, which is that all of these confrontations are opportunities sort of to challenge like the current psychic landscape, and these figures, you know, the devouring mother, the potential of that kind of arises within us to show us our potential, both shadow and light, so that we can grapple with them and understand them and integrate them as we prepare to move into these sort of next stages. And so hopefully, you know, we bump into, you know, the Great Mother archetype, and she prepares us for the role of motherhood, and at the same time also warns us of what could be or what could go wrong or what happens when we don't address our darkness, and how that can twist and kind of darken the pool of beautiful kind of mother to child relationship. And yeah, so thank you for the response, and looking forward to more.
Yay. I don't know who you are, but I love you.
I do too. You should come back and we should talk more.
Yay! Another philosopher queen. Oh, yes. Great. We got some excellent questions going in the chat here. Let's see here. And Rachel, do you want to answer any of those provocations while I kind of sort through the questions?
There's a lot of questions. What do you think of feminine, reply? It's hard. Libido thing. So Alexander Bard is a friend of mine, but I actually have not read that. Like Raven has. So she might be a better person to answer that question. But what I do understand is that he believes that there is a phallic nature that is being lost. And I definitely see that with a lot of what you would call the soy boys who that is causing women to embrace their more masculine devouring nature. And I think that is a positive thing. Like I know as a single woman who was once married, I've made my mistakes, right? That it's very hard for me to meet men who exhibit any masculinity at all. And that has made me more in touch with the dark feminine aspect of myself. So yeah, I definitely think we are going through a feminization in this current zeitgeist. And I believe that this has created a bunch of like hashtag Instagram pseudo feminists who are only willing to discuss the bright light. And I do think that is very harmful to the cycle of birth, like Lisa and you were talking about.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think this question, Anjan, is like, I'll just read it out loud just so that everybody can get it for the video. What do you think of Alexander Bard's model of the world being more feminine or more phallic? His whole digital libido thing. So, you know, I think I understand Bard's position, which is basically there's no phallus. There's no phallus around, there's no authentic phallus, basically. What we're seeing is a kind of excess of femininity. And you can even see this in the kind of more excessive stages of feminism where, you know, little boys are being encouraged to, you know, take on feminine traits or to dress up as girls, you know, like an actual kind of desire. And this, I would say, is the devouring mother. This is the devouring mother showing up in real life with their children, where she's like, you know, wants to create the child and her image of what is best for the child. And in a way is imposing a kind of feminization on the child because there has been a demonization of masculinity. And for Bard, right, like the authentic phallus is something that is very difficult to attain. It is a masculine pursuit and has been traditionally, and is something that's necessary for the perpetuation of civilization. And, you know, this is where his understanding of religion fits in. So religion is like a kind of template or a process or, you know, a set of kind of metaphysical precepts that allows for a person to move themselves into a process of becoming the kind of authentic phallic force of existence. And, you know, the Messiah would be an example of a kind of authentic phallic figure. And right now we have a lack of leaders in our world. There's a lot of what Bard would say is like kind of Peter Pan little boys running the show, who are more interested in their own narcissism and their own need for attention than they are in actually doing the difficult work of making hard decisions and leading the world. And so, I mean, my question about this has been, what is the kind of virtual phallus, right? So of course, you know, men have penises. That's like a pretty direct relationship to the phallus. But the phallus as a authentic phallus is not that which is just inherently endowed to a man. It is not. You have to work for it. You have to become that thing. And in that sense, it's virtual. And I wonder about, can I do that? Do I need a penis to have the virtual authentic phallus? I actually think that there's a possibility that I don't. And I think that's a unique kind of quality of becoming a integration of these two forces. And I think Camille Paglia, I mean, she identifies as trans. And I actually think that this is exactly what she thinks of, is this kind of virtuality of the authentic phallus. And her embodiment of this through her, the myriad kind of complexity of her sense of persona and her way of approaching and being in the world is that which is the androgen, is the unification, is trans in a transcendent sense, not merely that which moves between poles, but is actually that which is above the poles in a kind of synthesis, in a kind of dialectic. So yeah, I mean, this is one of the questions that I've been working on quite a lot in my own thinking is like, the Bardian kind of view of reality and how that fits in with the Paulian view, and then where that kind of places men and women in terms of actualizing themselves. And I'm really hoping that we can have Alexander Bard on to talk through some of the elements that are specifically around the feminine, because, you know, he's got lots of things that he talks about, but I really want to nail him down on this specific element. So thanks for the question.
Raven, if I could ask a quick clarification.
Of course, yeah.
I don't quite understand like how society or the internet, like such large meta things, can be phallic or female in nature. Like, okay. Could you help us there?
Sure. So in order to get a handle on that, I think I'm going to reference Marshall Mcluhan. So Marshall Mcluhan, for those of you who don't know, was a media theorist that was extraordinarily influential in the 50s and 60s, and he basically outlines this understanding of mediums, right? So his classic statement is the medium is the message. So there's certain kinds of mediums that have a kind of grammar to them, right? So he differentiates two. There is the acoustic medium. The acoustic medium is perspectival. It's that which is non-linear. It kind of moves around you. It's receptive. It comes to you. And I think that this maps on, the acoustic medium maps on very well to the Dionysian or the feminine. The medium, the visual medium, which is literacy, it's writing. So acoustic orality, that's the communication medium. And the literacy, which is a visual medium because you read the communication, is sequential. It's delineated. It is, in this sense, the Apollinian, which is also associated with the phallus, right? So I think grounding those ideas in kind of properties that you can actually interact with. So reading a long book, like one of these bad boys, is a like phallic endeavor. It is like an endeavor of the sequential. It is an endeavor of moving through a grammar that pushes you forward through a linear progression of time. To listen, you know, to be around a campfire, to be in an oral tradition, is not sequential in the same respect. And what Mcluhan theorizes is that the internet is actually going to be a revival of the acoustic. That the qualities of the acoustic medium will be the qualities of the digital medium. And I think we've seen this bore out. So we're kind of moving away from communicating through long form arguments. This is something that, you know, the Enlightenment people are freaking out about because they're seeing this kind of what they consider to be a regression. But really what it is a kind of exploration of the medium of the internet, which is that which is mediated through image. You can create images and you can snapshot them so that they have their own kind of grammar. And that is a new communication style that has Dionysian elements. It's empathic, it's intuitional. It doesn't have to explicitly reveal what it means. You look at a video and it looks self-evident what it means. And yet it actually is hiding. I mean, you can think about Instagram, right? You cultivate a kind of perception, but behind the camera, you know, your house is in disarray, right? So there's this distance between that which is presented and that which is experienced. And this medium, the digital medium, has very kind of feminine qualities in this sense. So I don't know if that helps at all, but I think kind of grounding it in some specificity of medium is a really a good way of accessing this. And I would absolutely recommend Marshall Mcluhan as a way to get a handle on what it means to even say like the internet is feminizing. Like, yeah, I mean, if you don't have the context, that sounds patently absurd. You're like, what do you mean by that? But when you kind of see it as connected to these other theoretical concepts, it actually does open up the possibility of understanding how these elements are connected to one another.
Is there a Mcluhan book in particular you recommend?
I will get back to you. I'm thinking of a lot of
I would
papers. Rachel, maybe
say,
you
like, understanding media is his big one. The medium is the massage, is his quick read. He does explain a lot of the symbolic nature of dialogue, of just like generating messages, how the media operates on an objective kind of systems thinking approach. So understanding media, if you want to like fully grasp Mcluhan, the medium is the massage if you just want the cliff notes. So yeah, he's definitely been a very influential thinker in a lot of philosophical circles. And he does explain this very well. In my opinion though, I think that he's a little bit too focused on power, kind of like Foucault, and a bit reductionist in that way, where everything seems to be about like transmitting power and like gaining influence. And I think a lot of that like misses out on the primal core of the divine feminine nature. Not to get off into a tangent, but that's my post-Mcluhanist take. Um, so yeah, I'm seeing some good links in the chat. I saw a good comment from Hannah, just to take this in a little bit of a new direction. I thought the queen in Snow White was so beautiful. I felt the same way. And even like Maleficent, played by Angelina Jolie, you know, maybe it wasn't like the best dialogue that she had, but the archetype that she embodied was incredible. Even like Mystique from X-Men, I remember a scene where Mystique is trying to be more like the humans in one of the X-Men films, and Magneto is like, you know, that's beauty. You know, like when Mystique she reveals like her true dark essence. And I would definitely echo that. And I do think that a lot of the dark feminine qualities have been villainized in Hollywood. And I think that maybe it's time for something new. I'm reading about Jessica Jones here. I love that show. I think it's really on the same wavelength as what we're talking about. So yeah, just some opinions. Okay.
definitely. So pretty sure we only scheduled an hour here. So we're already 5 minutes up. Rachel, do you have any closing statements? Philosopher Queen?
Well, I would just say that it's a pleasure to be involved in this. And I'm just seeing so many questions. What would a non-villainized or here at the Stoa? This is actually what we're creating. And yes, we encourage everybody to pursue this, to tell your friends, your family about this panel, and to join us the next time. Feel free to recommend Philosopher Queens to us, and yeah, let's get this party started.
Yeah, definitely. And you can, if you want to suggest anything to us, you can always find us on Twitter. You know, any questions or thoughts you may have. And yeah, we'll be back with. I'm really hoping we can get Nina Power on next time. I'm currently taking her Bataille course with Justin Murphy, and it's like, oh, it's incredible. So yes, indeed. Well, thank you all so very much. It has been such a gift to have your presence here, and your consideration of our wild thoughts. And we will be continuing this. I will do my duty as a host here and tell you all about a few of the events that are coming up. So we have a really stacked lineup here at the Stoa coming up. So definitely take a look at the full list, but just to pick out some specific things that I think you definitely should not miss. I've really hearing some wonderful things about Sand Talk with Tyson Incaporta, who is an Australian Aboriginal man who recently wrote a book called Sand Talk, and there's a lot of wisdom there, and we're really excited that he could come to the Stoa and talk to us. That's going to be on August 18th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We have Metamodern Stoicism with Daniel Schwachtenberger. It's been rescheduled, so you can come and see us with Daniel on August 24th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And that's going to be a 75-minute event. And what else? We also have the Bioemotive Framework, Live Emotional Processing with Doug Carterin. And that's going to be August 27th at 2:15 p.m. for half an hour. So lots of amazing things coming up here at the Stoa. And then, of course, we always have the Wisdom Gym. And yeah, I think with that, oh, and one more thing. We have the Sense Maker in Residence as well, which is like a series of 3 events coming from a different sense maker figure in the kind of network that we all dwell in. This month, it is John Robb talking about networked tribalism. Great. Yeah, and any other events, you can, of course, visit us at thestoa.ca. Yeah, so it was great to see you all. Thank you so much. And see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
See ya.